For Nietzsche, women were storms, mysteries, and sometimes enemies. But above all, they were chaos, and chaos, in his view, was essential to creation. His notorious line, "When you go to women, take your whip," from Thus Spoke Zarathustra, has inspired untold ire and controversy. Yet, Nietzsche also admired women who went against the grain, praising their strength and intellect. These contradictions raise a question. What did Nietzsche truly think about women? To understand Nietzsche's perspective, we must start in the world he lived in. Women in 19th century Germany were largely locked away at home, engaged in domestic duties, and rarely did they find intellectual opportunities. Nietzsche's philosophy speaks to the limitations of his time, as well as his inability to get beyond those limitations. Meanwhile, his relationships with females, his mother, sister, Andreas-Salomé, lent gravitas to his incongruous thoughts. Nietzsche's mother, Franziska, played a dominant role in his early life, particularly after his father's death when Nietzsche was 5. She managed the household and raised her children with strict adherence to Christian values. Nietzsche later rejected these beliefs, associating Christianity with weakness and conformity, but he maintained contact with Franziska throughout his life, even relying on her for care during his years of illness. And while his writings rarely discuss her directly, his critiques of conventional morality may reflect his struggles with the rigid environment she upheld. His sister, Elizabeth Forster Nietzsche, had a far more contentious and ultimately harmful relationship with him. Ambitious and controlling, Elizabeth often clashed with Nietzsche's ideals, especially his rejection of nationalism and anti-Semitism. After Nietzsche's mental collapse in 1889, Elizabeth manipulated his unpublished works to align with her own ideologies. Nietzsche, however, openly denounced anti-Semitism and ecce homo, stating, "I allow no one to ascribe to me their own crude nationalist prejudices." He seemed intent on resisting simplifications, even when those around him sought to impose them. Andreas-Salomé, perhaps the most fascinating woman in Nietzsche's life, inspired both admiration and heartbreak. Nietzsche was enamored of her intelligence and independence, famously proposing marriage to her multiple times, though she rejected him. He once wrote to her, "You are like a marvelous storm. It is difficult to endure you, but more difficult to live without you." Their brief collaboration reflected Nietzsche's ideal of a strong, autonomous partner, but their falling out left scars. Salomé, for her part, maintained lasting respect for Nietzsche, describing him as a man driven by both intellectual passion and profound isolation. Nietzsche's harshest statements about women reveal his frustration, not only with individuals, but with broader cultural trends. And beyond good and evil, he asserted, "Woman wants to be independent," and thereby she ceases to be a woman. And while this remark can sound dismissive, it fits within his critique of those who sought independence through imitation of existing power structures. In Nietzsche's view, true freedom required a reinvention of values, not a repetition of the established norms. And his disdain for superficial forms of independence extended to men as well, whom he likened to herd animals lacking originality. Women also played a symbolic role in Nietzsche's philosophy. He described truth as a woman who has reasons for not letting us see her reasons in Beyond Good and Evil, likening it to something seductive yet elusive. And this metaphor ties Nietzsche's broader rejection of absolute truths, suggesting that the pursuit of knowledge requires embracing ambiguity and flux. And similarly, he associated femininity with vitality and chaos, praising these forces for their creative energy even as he critiqued their unpredictability. Now, feminist thinkers have found Nietzsche's work both problematic and fertile ground for reinterpretation. Simone de Beauvoir, for instance, engaged with this idea of eternal recurrence, describing it as a radical rejection of fixed roles and identities in the second sex. Others argue that Nietzsche's rejection of rigid moral codes reconsiders the structures that define gender. And although those words often alienate readers, the philosophical underpinnings of his work open doors to more fluid understandings of masculinity and femininity. So, how do we reconcile Nietzsche's writings on women? His harshest comments often reflect his personal disillusionments or the biases of his era, yet they stand alongside moments of genuine admiration for women who defy convention. Nietzsche's philosophy refuses straightforward categorization, as he favored contradiction and tension as sources of strength. As he also wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." His writings on women reflect that chaos. Nietzsche's contradictions reflect both the limits and possibilities of his time, and by examining his relationships with Franziska, Elizabeth, and Salomé, we see the personal roots of his ideas. And by exploring his harshness, his admiration, and his symbolic use of women, we gain a fuller picture of his thought. Though his statements often provoke discomfort, they also incite a re-examination of power, identity, and tradition. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a like, maybe a share, and if you haven't subscribed already, this is a great time to do so. And until next time, you might enjoy this one.